Volume is vanity, right?
Yeah.
Profit is sanity. And
correct.
When you hear these things and they make sense to you and they resonate with how you perceive the world and your business, you hold on to them.
So you can have the nicest trucks, the nicest facilities in the world, the lowest cost of goods possible. But if you have bad people, you'll find a way to screw it all up.
Nobody walked across water. We're all human. We are going to make mistakes. Just acknowledging it and moving on is really one of the most important things. I know that it's difficult for people that have been here for a long time because we're trying to change it. We've been too generous, and now we're trying to put the toothpaste back in the tube. And it's really tough, but it's necessary.
Particularly necessary if you go through a year like 2022 when fuel prices shoot through the roof, because all of a sudden your cash drops considerably and your inventory and your AR balances go through, and that can create a real big cash flow problem. So these things are protectionary. If you're doing them at a time when you have normal stable commodity prices, people might think that you're being a tough guy. But 3 months, one war, some geopolitical event on another part of the world can significantly hinder the company. It can wipe out your cash like that.
Every petroleum jobber seems to be made up with a little bit of different clay and mud and rock and glass. Yeah. We're not in the business of charging finance charges to make money. It's designed as an incentive for people to pay us on time.
David Ryan, thanks for being here. Thanks for doing this.
Happy to be here. Yeah, thanks for asking me to do it.
All right. I do want to introduce you, give you a little bit of a bio background, but before we do that, I'd like to do a little warm up, brain fire up.
Fire it up.
All right. So first off, it's March 7th, 2025. First question. Are you a morning person or a night owl?
Morning person.
Okay. What's your favorite comfort food?
Oh gosh, I am probably more in the beef stew, type of comforts. Old, root vegetables, beef. Cook the hell out of it. That's me. I love it.
Very Irish of you.
Yeah.
All right. What's your favorite TV show or movie?
Oh God, I love The Godfather. The Godfather saga. I think it was so well done. Classic. And actually it's sort of the great American success story, right? I mean, it's great entertainment.
It is, with a little bit of violence and crime mixed in.
It's reality.
I used to be a Godfather 2 was my favorite, which is rare for a sequel. Yeah. But now with Bobby taking his political direction, I now have reverted back to Godfather 1 being my favorite. All right. What fuel source does your vehicle run on?
Premium gasoline.
Okay. That's code for nice car. All right. If you had to give the 47th president, Donald J. Trump, a grade on his policy approach to energy and the economy, what would it be?
A++.
Nice. All right. Last one. Are you East Coast or a West Coast guy?
Oh my goodness. That's it's impossible for me to pick. Obviously my roots are on the East Coast, but I'm loving the West Coast. And it's been an exciting adventure for Beth and I. And it's been a lot of fun. So yeah, I'm kind of straddling both coasts.
All right, fair enough. Well, we'll get into that in a little bit. But first, I want to give you a bio, a little bit of background for the audience. So you received your bachelor's degree in accounting from the American International College. After receiving your CPA license, you were hired by Coopers & Lybrand, which is now PwC. And after working as an auditor, you were then hired by one of your clients, a jobber by the name of Ellie Belcher. And during nearly a 30-year tenure,
no CPA license.
No CPA.
Passed the exam but waited too long, so I never got the letters. And by then I was at Belcher, so I didn't need it, so I never went back to pass the first part again. There's a delay. I delayed in passing all three parts. It was 4 parts, all 4 parts. So I never got it. And at that point, I was already the controller at Belcher's and never got it. So, all right. But I passed all 4 parts of the exam. So.
Okay. All right. So at Ellie Belcher's, you had about a 30-year tenure. You held the position, as you mentioned, of controller, director of retail operations, director of wholesale operations, and then ultimately chief operating officer.
Yeah.
All right. And then Ellie Belcher ultimately sold the business through a bifurcated deal in 2017. And in 2021, you resurfaced and decided to move out west to work with another legacy jobber family business.
Absolutely.
Rebel Oil Company.
Yep. That's right.
Okay. Well, then tell us a little bit about your upbringing in Massachusetts and how you ended up studying accounting at AIC.
Well, I took an unconventional path. I will put it that way. And I got to go back and say, I came from a great family. My parents were hardworking people, great values, valued education. I'm one of 6 children. Was a close-knit family growing up. And so when I came from, I say I came from a house of intellectuals, and I was not one. So I sort of rebelled a little bit. I went off to college and was not an academic and flunked out of school as a freshman, having too much fun. My dad, to his credit, just encouraged me to stay with my foot in the door. So I took jobs. Actually, go back. I started working, really when I was about 14 or 15, various jobs. I worked in a country club. So all through high school, I was working, learned how to cook. And when I was in college, I flunked out of school because I was just not engaged in college. I worked full time. I drove a truck. I worked in a warehouse. I worked in a gas station. And then I went to school nights for a number of years. And when I finally got my degree, I graduated with honors. And I had some siblings that went to really good schools, but my mom would say, "You're the only one whose degree says with honors on it." So I like to point that out to my more academically achieved siblings. But regardless, I think that kind of being a little bit of a slow learner helped me to have a more pragmatic approach to work. When I got to work, Belcher's was, well, first of all, I went to work at Coopers and Lybrand because I had good grades out of school. I was a serious student at the end, a little bit mature than most people at that point because I was a little older. And I worked a number of different engagements at Coopers and Lybrand, and I ended up at the Ellie Belcher Company. And that was a challenge because it's back in the day of a manual accounting system. You're talking, manual general ledgers and
accounts.
Yeah, credits. Oh my goodness. Green bar and it's really it's real manual accounting. And so also was a small, relatively small business if you look at the number of employees that were there. But they were doing decent numbers. It was a profitable company. They were very debt averse. It was Charlie Huff, who was really the owner of that business, was a Depression era guy, truck driver turned business owner, tremendous individual. He had great values. He worked really hard. He got along with people. People loved him. But a lot like Jack Kaysen, who I never had the pleasure of meeting, very similar entrepreneurial spirit, hardworking. People would say, the salt of the earth, great people, treat you well, fair but firm. That's something Charlie always said. And so working there was, you wore a bunch of different hats. Like there was plenty of days I was out cleaning up oil spills, going out to visit customers. When we got into the store business, I was riding stores at 4 a.m. It did anything. I carried a beeper. I was going to the warehouse when the alarm went off in the middle of the night. That was the culture. You did whatever you had to do. And
I'll tell you the story about how I started working there in October 1988, and I ended up going to the Christmas party that year, and it was in a very small room. There was about 10 people there, and there was a gentleman named Franny Mills who had started working with Charlie in the 1930s. They were both truck drivers at the time. And so Charlie sort of pokes fun at Franny, says, I don't know, I've been carrying you for 50 years, whatever it was. And then, he takes his good-natured jabs, and then he has the most heartwarming sort of compliment. Oh, you've been my dearest friend. I couldn't have done this without you. And he pulls out an envelope and he gives him his Christmas bonus at the party. And Charlie repeated that to everybody in the room. And again, I had been there 2 months. I was not expecting anything. And I got a bonus that year, which I was not at all expecting. But it wasn't the money. It was the heartfelt gratitude and appreciation that he shared towards every single person in a very personal way. I remember I went home and I said to my wife, I made the right decision going here. And for 30 years, I felt that way. Like this was a good place to be. So
let's expand on that. What was life like as an auditor, trained accountant, working with several different customers or clients at the time? Why did you end up choosing Ellie Belcher? I think that reinforced your decision, the Christmas party example, but what led to the decision?
So I'll go off track a little bit here. Ellie Belcher, Charlie Huff had picked really good professional people to help him with his business. He was a truck driver who bought the company on a handshake in 1952, I think. He had a great lawyer and he had a great accountant. And he used those people to his advantage. He will tell you, I didn't know how to read a financial paper, but he taught himself. He had a good accountant named Henry Downey, who was an independent CPA who helped him sort of manage the accounting function. Henry passed away, and there was a guy named George Sullivan who was Henry's successor, who then took over the business. George had gotten run over by his own golf cart in a tragic golf cart accident, and he had his arm amputated. Well, it was his arm that he wrote on, and this was back in the day of manual work papers and audit stuff. So he learned how to write with his left hand, and so he had been Charlie's accountant for years. And when he passed away, Charlie went out and interviewed accountants, and the managers from Coopers & Lybrand convinced him that he should go to Coopers & Lybrand. So just by fate, I end up on the engagement. So I essentially go out and I'm trying to interpret and decipher this chicken scratch paper, work papers, to sort of follow the audit trail so that I can now put the audit together. So that was a challenge, and learn the business and understand what I'm trying to do as a young accountant. But I think what really impressed Eddie and Charlie was there was a gentleman who worked for me, a younger accountant than me, who had gotten into a little bit of a shouting match with their bookkeeper, a woman who she had been there for 20 years. And so the very first conversation I ever had with Charlie Huff was, I'm sitting in the conference room, toiling over trying to decipher this stuff. And the receptionist says, David, Mr. Huff is on the phone for you. Pick up the phone. Good morning, Mr. Huff. David Ryan, Coopers & Lybrand. What can I do for you today? And all he says is, tell your guy to back off my girl. Click, and he hangs up the phone. I'm like, whoa, what is this all about? So I find out what happened. I diffused the situation, obviously reprimand the guy that worked for me, worked hard to build back the trust and the rapport with the bookkeeper. And so we got through it. And so when I was leaving, we were wrapping up the audit. I think it was Charlie's son, Ed, said to me, Dave, if you ever think of leaving, we're looking for somebody to come in-house because we need some internal, expertise. And at the time, I'm like, oh, that's nice. Thanks for thinking of me. And it was a few months later, it just, after, 3 years at Coopers, the inability to make a plan, the hours were grueling. And I remember talking to one of the senior managers who I really, had a good relationship with. And I said, geez, Ed Huff asked me if I wanted to, take over this, controllership at Belcher's. I said, I don't know what to do. And at the time, big accounting firms were very happy to place their people within client companies because it really solidified those relationships. And so he said to me, well, Dave, if you do take the job and you don't like it, you can always say you were the controller of a, medium-sized oil business. She's what? Oh, that sounds pretty good. So I went there.
Resume builder.
Resume builder. But really it was, I got paid more money, but really it was more normal hours. I mean, there was days when, Beth and I would have plans to go away for the weekend, and I'd call her at 4:00 on a Friday and say, something's come up. I'm going to be working all weekend. I can't go. So the quality of life was not great with Cooper's. It was great training. The people I worked with were top notch. The clients were great. You learned a lot because you get kind of thrown into the fire. And working in manufacturing or in nonprofits or big warehouses. I mean, you see a lot of businesses as a young accountant. And again, based on my experience where I had worked in a warehouse, had driven a truck, had done different things, I sort of had a more, I think, a broader understanding of many businesses than some of the kids right out of school who never really had a job before. So I think I was able to interact at a more personal level with people, the warehouse guys, the drivers, that sort of thing. I mean, it's not rocket science. It's, I remember we had a guy who worked with us, a beloved guy, Ron Lamson, he was an old truck driver from the 50s, and he was our sales guy. And I remember trying to talk to him about the inventory. I'm trying to get my arms around the inventory. We had a bunch of storage tanks. We had product. And at the time, we had some consignment deals with our suppliers. And I remember talking to Ron saying, I got to get the inventory numbers together. And he's like, well, we got, 4 million gallons, whatever it was. I go, but we don't own it all, do we, Ron? Well, what do you mean? It's in our tank. I go, yeah, but isn't there this consignment deal? Oh, yeah, well, but we own a piece of it. So, okay, what's the piece of it? Because I've got to figure out what's on the books and is it right? And then it was, finds out it just kind of pulling apart. I'm trying to decipher and understand what he knows and how he's interpreting what I'm saying. And I know where I need to go, and I'm trying to explain to him what I need. And it turns out we've got product in other terminals. We're a position holder, using the term that you would understand. We had positions in other tanks. And then he says, oh, what about the stuff in New Haven? I'm like, what about the stuff in New Haven? We got product there too. I go, so we've got a committed, we bought the product. And he's like, no. So it turns out that wasn't really our inventory. It was an allocation. We had said to them, we'll take those barrels, but he said, if you don't buy them, you just don't get them next month. Right. So Again, it's more just kind of peeling the onion until you get to the right place and can really understand, interpret, and I think better understand how different people in the company understand their piece of the pie. And then you got to be able to decipher it and make sure that you're reporting correctly on your end on the accounting side. So
got it. Understood. So you're reinforced with your decision at the Christmas party. When you joined Ellie Belcher, is it a big organization, small organization, and how did it grow, or how did it develop over a 30-year tenure?
So it was a relatively large provider of heating oil and diesel fuel in the city of Springfield, Western Massachusetts, which, at that time, I joined the company right after Ed Huff, Charlie's son, had joined the company. He had gotten out of college, and he had worked there like in the summers, changing truck tires. He had done everything sales, but it was his family business. And so he had explained to me that the company, because it was primarily a heating oil distributor, they were very busy in the winter, but very slow in the summer, as you can imagine. Don't sell a lot of heating oil in the summer. And so he was looking to diversify the business to take some of the seasonality out of it, which was a great plan, smart plan. And so when I started there, I mean, I have a picture from 1988 standing outside that building. I think there was 8 or 10 employees. And so over the years, some of the things we did were we primarily to add, we had always been a Texaco distributor, but we didn't own any gas stations or convenience stores. And what we realized was when over the years, Texaco became Shell, and on the East Coast here, it was, I think it went to Chevron on the East Coast, so on the West Coast rather. So we realized that in order to really have any leverage with the major oil companies, you needed to own the gas station. So we had some third-party deals where we were wholesale distributors to independent gas station owners, but we didn't really control those sites because we couldn't just go take the flag down. Whereas if we owned the site, we could, I don't want to say threaten, but the leverage would be, I could take that 10 million gallons of volume and put another flag up there.
Yeah.
So you end up with more leverage when you own the site. So we started to add locations, and now you're getting into the convenience store business. And over the years, that really morphed from a gas station with 2 or 3 repair bays that were converted into a store to a larger footprint, multiple profit centers, co-brands, drive-throughs, separate diesel islands. I mean, it was an ever-evolving business, and it was involved in site selection and site design. It was a good business, and we grew, but we also continued to expand the wholesale distribution business or the branded distribution business. We did more commercial fuels. The company grew. I think when we ultimately sold the business, the footprint had grown from Western Mass, Connecticut, and southwestern New England to really marketing fuel from really Maine to Atlantic City, and a lot of that,
Like a regional distributor.
yeah, regional distributor. We had bought another terminal and built some new tanks. We expanded that. It was a gasoline terminal, dealing with some supplier, major suppliers. Actually, a division of Cargill was the throughput position holder there, and that was a very busy and lucrative terminal for us until what happened was with the Clean Air Act, where they put in the oxygenated fuel. I don't know what year that was, 80s, maybe 97, I think. I'm not sure. And so that terminal, I would say half of the volume went away because where it was situated, most of that product was heading north to Vermont and New Hampshire, but those became different oxygenate regions.
Yeah.
So we couldn't commingle it with the product that we had. So that's that product, that terminal then became a diesel terminal. We ended up with 10 tanks with about 10 million gallons of storage. Gave us a lot of flexibility. Back in the day, there was one product that was both on and off road, and you dyed it at the rack. At one point, the point of collection was at the wholesale level. They moved it up to the terminal level. So over the years, it really changed. And it was, I don't know, I'm getting off track here, just rambling, but the business grew. Oh, so let me get back to that business growth. So we got into the gas station business. We ended up, at one point, we sold electricity. We sold natural gas. We're in the donut business. I mean, we did a lot of different things. We were very close to building a big lube warehouse. We after a few years of sort of, I want to say, the shotgun approach. Let's try to do everything. We're like, we have to really focus on our core competency, and that really helped propel the business in a way that was more meaningful. It was, I don't say easier to run, but it was more efficient. And so when it's more efficient, it became more profitable. We had also very good people. And, when you treat people well and you have good people on board, it becomes,
things start to work out.
Yeah, they work out better. Yeah, absolutely.
I think you're getting to the hedgehog concept in people, but before we get into that, as the business is progressing during your tenure there, what's home life like? Because that was one of the main reasons that you had changed, right? Is so that you had more work-life balance. So, how was your family receptive to this?
So I got to tell you, there's this country song about this guy has a daughter who's, can't wait to move out of the house. And he says, oh, you're going to miss this someday,
Yeah.
It's that sort of thing. Like when we got married shortly after, I was working at Belcher's when we got married. And so very quickly the kids came and my wife stopped working. And I feel completely fortunate, really blessed that we were able to have her stay home. So our home life was awesome. We lived in a little house with a little backyard, plenty of big plastic toys for the kids. It was probably, 20 minutes to get to work. And, we lived in a nice bedroom community with good school systems. My wife was able to be involved with the kids at school, PTO. She knew every kid in town. It was really beneficial for me. And we talk about this where, by virtue of her covering the home base the way she did, I could focus on work but I didn't have to be at work 24 hours a day. And so my home life was great. I feel really blessed that, my kids are happy, healthy, productive, contributing to society, adults. I really believe that it's my wife's doing. Like I did have something to do with it, but really she did the heavy lifting with the kids.
It's a team effort, though. I think naturally you fall into roles, but they're very supportive of each other's roles.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's why the nuclear family is so important. And you told me a story about your son. He had asked you about one of his friends. I think it was Johnny's big house. Yeah. Talk about that, because I think that your son is now revisiting the principle of that story. And
exactly right. So he made mention to me one day. He was young. Johnny has a bigger house than us, and so I pointed out that I personally, have made a decision to work in a role that allows me to be home for dinner every night. And so it was. I said, look, I can get another job where I travel all the time, but would you rather have me be around, or would you rather
have the big house?
Big house. And he said, no, I'd rather you be around. So it was something that was pretty obvious to me that I had chosen to have a better work-life balance. And, there was times when, because of some of the people that we knew who had appeared to have many more material things, I think it's difficult for kids to see that. And so it was easy to point out to them that, it's not always about the size of the house. There's other things that really matter. And you're right. My son is at a position right now where he's, fortunately for him and his fiance, they're going to get married soon. They're living in the city. They need to figure out what they're going to do. And I think he's kind of thinking about the same thing. Like what's the best thing for me, my relationship, my quality of life, and maybe my mental health too. I don't know. I mean, he's got to figure that out. So yeah.
How do you want to distribute that pie chart of time? Right. I tell my friends, I'm of an age where we got young kids, 5, 3, and 1 currently. A lot of our friends have kids. And, we talk about birthdays, parties, gifts, traveling, all that. But try to remind myself at the end of it, time is the best gift you're going to give your kids. Awesome. That's the best ROI you're going to get.
And I enjoyed every single phase. Like, and Beth will tell you, when they were little tiny babies, I was the one doing the baths, and then, when they were playing in the backyard on the swing set, digging up the grass, I was there. Maybe during school, Beth was there more than I was there, but mostly for their games, they're traveling on the weekend. I was present, and was I a perfect dad? Absolutely not. But I tried my best, and I think that we have a very good relationship now with both of my kids, and that's not by accident, right? We worked we focused very traditional, dinner together as a family. Most nights, it was important to us. And so I think as a result, our kids are well adjusted and, decent human beings as a result. So I'm very happy about that.
That's good. Yeah. To me, that common theme there is intentionality. Right? Like struggle in college because maybe you don't have your priorities in order, or you're just young and immature. You make the same mistakes that everybody makes. Most people make. Yeah. And then you make an intentional decision of where you're going to go work. Yeah. After you start working, you get married, kids pop out. The wife makes an intentional decision that, hey, I'm going to prioritize time with my family, which frees you up to be able to go and work. Yeah. And you chose a job that allowed you still to be present. And when you're present, you're intentional with your kids. Yeah. You're not on your phones. You're not in the airport. You're not traveling. So it's about maximizing the time that you get, I think. Yeah. It's super important.
And so, this is where you get back to the job that you have, right? The commitment that you're making. I can tell you that, Charlie Huff was one of those guys who, if I mentioned that, my daughter had a fever, I'd get a call that night, 8:00. Oh God, Charlie's calling. What does he want? Because sometimes it was, where are the numbers? But it was then on that particular instance, it would be, how's your daughter doing? It was a genuine sense that he was concerned about me. He cared about my family. And, that really builds such a tremendous sense of goodwill that you would run through the wall for that guy. And Ed was the same way, is the same way to this day. I've told you, I love him like a brother. And probably one of if not the most, high integrity people that I've ever met in my life. And I can't say enough about that. I mean, those two guys were really, Charlie was more of a mentor. I mean, he was very tough, firm, but fair. But then, I'll tell you this story where I was ready to kind of have a really difficult conversation with an employee one day. And I'm sitting in my office. The guy's coming in at 2:00 and he's on his last leg with me. I'm kind of upset. And so Charlie barges in because it's his office, right? Really? He sits down. What's going on? I go, oh, so-and-so's coming in and I'm so he's that. Oh, he's getting cranked up. This poor kid walks in, not kid, but the young man walks in, sits down. Charlie's there, I'm there. We're both just frothing at the mouth. We're ready to go. And the guy starts crying, and I'm like taken aback. Oh my goodness. What,
this messes up my plan.
Yeah, I got to do. And Charlie morphed from a pissed off business owner to a empathetic human being right before my eyes. And I could see him visibly change. And he puts his hand on the guy's knee and says, hey, I don't know what's going on, but you shouldn't feel this way at work. And just really genuinely compassionate and empathetic, and told the kid, take the rest of the day, go home, relax, let's talk Monday. And that was a real strong message for me. I got to be a little bit more sensitive to people. And it's one thing to be tough when you need to be tough, but you don't always need to be tough. And, things like that. There was other times when we had customers who maybe I get my quote Irish up and I'm ready to cut them loose. And he would say, Dave, you got to eat a lot of crow in this business. And, you remember those things over the years, And so as much as you don't like it, sometimes you have to kind of bite the bullet and for the better of the business, So, and you've heard me quote a number of other, sort of nuggets of wisdom. The one of my favorites from a competitor, friendly competitor, said to me one day, "Volume is vanity, right? And profit is sanity." And
correct.
When you hear these things and they make sense to you and they resonate with how you perceive the world and your business, you hold on to them. And I use those things as I, now try to mentor and coach the people that work with me, the younger people, because it's helpful to keep it simple. And so when you're trying to figure out how to manage the business and grow the business and make it more efficient, make it more profitable, there are certain sort of fundamentals that you need to be just sort of consistently aware of. And, that's one of the things I like about being here at Rebel is there's a lot of opportunity for me to share those pieces of, experience or wisdom, whatever you want to call it, because everybody is so receptive and everybody here is really open to learning and willing to learn, and they want to learn, and they care about the business because the ownership cares about them. So they are genuinely, trying to be better professionals.
And best version of themselves.
It's palpable here, and you see it.
So I'm glad you mentioned that, right? Because I feel like when you're young, your brain's firing quickly, you're ambitious, you're tenacious, you'll get after it. I think that you have energy beyond maybe what someone that's more senior than you has. But that's the purpose of why we're doing this too, is the older you get, what you accumulate, even if you lose a little bit of energy, you're not moving as fast, you accumulate wisdom. And if the young people aren't talking to the older people that are seniors that have been there and done that, even though they're working really hard and there's a lot of activity, it may be an inefficient route towards achievement.
It's a two-way street. I mean, we're talking today in the accounting meeting about the training that James is doing with Excel for the accounting team. And he's as old as I am, and so everybody's very receptive and they're wowed by what they're finding they can do by just being exposed to it. And then we list down all the other applications that we have that people feel they could use more training on. So, we're investing in those people. And this is where, we've talked about this in our leadership dynamics program, where we want to, the goal is to really identify what skills we can sharpen in people, provide the training. It's investing in those people. And not only will it make them more versatile and more capable, but it's demonstrating that we're committed to them personally, right? By building their skill set. And again, that's a very powerful motivator, and it's good.
My grandfather, Dan McGrew, joined the Merchant Marines on October 4th, 1943 at the age of 17. On March 1st, 1946, the vessel broke in half off of Attic, Alaska. It broke at the number 5 tank, the exact craft we had in Australia in 1943. My grandfather was stuck for 5 days on a ship,
Just waiting.
hoping and praying that someone would show up. Luckily, nobody died from this thing cracking in half. I really grew as a person being a litigator. I got very, very comfortable and good at doing cross-examinations and depositions. The first year is definitely the hardest because you haven't studied the law yet and you're just being thrown into this. And it's different than you think it's going to be. It's always fun to go into a deposition and have a gotcha moment. I had experiences where I've been deposing a doctor and then we finished the deposition and the claims counsel called me and said, okay, let's settle now. I don't want to go through anymore. If you have policies in place, gotta call them. I think that's one of the biggest things that they're going after right now when they're going for those nuclear verdicts is their safety culture is just an illusion.
Yeah.
That's what they want to say. When we want to show, no, that's not true. We take it seriously. This is what we do.
It's a reality. It's enforced. It's embedded in our culture. And unfortunately, this event happened. We're going to try to do right by it. But all the research that you're going to see shows that this is truly a safe culture.
I think people are the most important asset any organization has. Like we have trucks, we've got terminals, we got bulk plants, and we constantly remind people that's great. We take a lot of pride in our facilities. There's a lot of capital that's tied into those facilities as well, but they don't run themselves. No, trucks don't drive themselves. Terminals don't operate themselves. We need good people. People actually accelerate the business. You can have the nicest trucks, the nicest facilities in the world, the lowest cost of goods possible. But if you have bad people, you'll find a way to screw it all up.
And again, that's one of the things that I really love about being at Rebel. And I loved it at Belcher's. The people were great. I mean, there's many of those people that I worked with over the years. I call routinely, check in, how you doing? Because I cared about them as people, and so same thing here. The people are amazing. And not just the people in the office that I see every day, but the people in the field. Our guy up in the North Country, had a conversation with him, and he is always so willing to accept responsibility for things, even when I know he didn't do them. you know?
Yeah.
And I said to him, I said, I so much appreciate that, because so many people are so quick to point the finger or deflect blame, and it sits squarely with him. And it's very refreshing. And you know, when somebody expresses that to you, that they are willing to fix it. You know?
Yeah.
And that's really the bottom line. Nobody walked across water. We're all human. We are going to make mistakes, but just acknowledging it and moving on is really one of the most important things, because it's frustrating otherwise.
Well, and typically you have to work as a team to try to solve the problem. And I think, I'm actually happy when we identify mistakes, as you know.
I know.
You think my head's going to fly off, I'm going to curse everybody. I do get frustrated when we revisit the same mistake, because I feel like it's the proverbial, we've climbed the mountain, we've taken the ground, and now we're sliding back down the mountain and we've got to do it again. And it's just as hard to do it the second time. I like when new mistakes, new errors, as long as they're not, overly, dramatic, you can, what's in the team, you can solve it, you can put in new processes, policies, but you all collectively learn from it together. But yeah, the guys that are shifting blame, pointing fingers, they don't typically last long.
It's, again, it's an indication that they care about what they're doing. And those are, that sort of, it's a commitment. And yet that only comes when it's a two-way street and they feel like you're watching out for them and you care about them. So
I think it's also helpful if you know that you're rowing in the same direction towards the same strategic goals. So like as you're talking about your tenure at Ellie Belcher, the family life, walk us through as you're getting prepared for this bifurcated sale that happened in 2017, because you had mentioned leadership dynamics, which is strategic planning plus. There's more to it than that. Mm-hmm. So can you explain that, how beneficial that was to prepare the company for a sale?
So I can tell you that prior to leadership dynamics, we brought in consultants. And what was happening was, I'll step back and say, one of the hallmarks of Ellie Belcher was we operated very lean. And so we wore a lot of hats. And that was, for 30 years, I never once felt, oh my goodness, I might lose my job because the economy failing, or there's a recession or a slowdown, because we provided essential services. We ran the business in a very efficient way. And so I just never worried about that ever. And so, plus I felt like I was working hard all the time, right? So, but we brought in consultants at one point to help us figure out how to get better control in the business. And I liken it to the tail was wagging the dog, Ed and I felt like we were just always putting out fires, and we weren't really ever focused properly on pointing the business in the right direction. We spent a lot of money with these consultants, mediocre results. What they did do was come in and say, take this particular position and split it into 2 or 3 different parts. And, and so that was helpful. But when we did engage with leadership dynamics, they were recommended to us through a friend, business associate of ours, of Ed's particularly, who had some experience with them. And so Paul Brown, the president of Leadership Dynamics, we sat with him. We began strategic planning, sitting outside of the office, devising first, the process. We've done it here, identify the core values, right? The non-negotiables of the business, and the hedgehog concept, which I'm happy to discuss more if you prefer.
Well, real quick, the core values, but also behaviors that are associated with those values. It's easy to say honesty and integrity.
Right.
It's more difficult to say what sort of behaviors are associated to that value, and are we demonstrating those behaviors in this workplace?
Right. And I can tell you that, when you identify the core values and you outline what those behaviors are that demonstrate those, Paul would say, and you can use these as a mirror to hold up to each other when you're not behaving according to the core values. I think I've shared with you when Ed, I'll throw under the bus here, was mad at something. I won't do this, I'll do that. oh, hey, is that consistent with our core values? I'll screw you, Dave. You know, so it was a good natured way to sort of diffuse the situation. But also I could tell you that Ellie Belcher had a tremendous reputation, right? As a first-class operation, high integrity, firm but fair, similar to Rebel, very, very similar to Rebel. But when we got into the convenience store business, all of a sudden, even though Rebel had been around 70 years, we had people who worked for the company who didn't even know who Charlie Huff was, right? And so the reputation didn't transcend business lines.
Disconnect, yeah.
So I remember talking to Paul saying, we have a problem. We have a cultural divide where we have this sort of great reputation on the wholesale side, but not on the retail side. He said, how do you know? I go, well, very easily. We always have to discuss, are we going to invite those people to the Christmas party, you know? So kind of a joke, but it really highlights the division, you know? And so we worked really hard to bring it all together. And so by using leadership dynamics and, you know, taking those non-negotiables and communicating them to everybody, we were telling them, these are the non-negotiable behaviors and characteristics that we expect you to live up to as a member of our company. And so I think it was helpful for them to understand that we took it seriously and that we expected them to behave appropriately. And so, and I can tell you, I can't think of any outstanding issues where anybody went off the rails and we said, oh, look at those behaviors. You didn't live up to them. I think because we were clear on the expectation, we really never had a problem.
The culture reflected those values and behaviors.
Yeah. And, there were certainly times when, somebody wasn't a good fit. Okay, they weren't a good fit, and that's fine. So again, back to the leadership dynamics, you would do the values and then the vision and the mission and the strategic plan, the long-term strategic plan, and then, setting those yearly goals and the departmental goals. I would say, and I'm a little reluctant to say on camera, I think that helped propel the business to a higher multiple.
All right.
That's all I want to say.
Shout out to Paul Brown. You can use that. The testimonials to David, they're rare.
And I will say this, and Paul knows this, it was a pain in the ass. And I've told you
it is.
And every single year it was, we got another meeting with Paul. We got to go through this rigmarole. And I remember talking to Ed saying, oh God, we got to do this again. Oh yeah, we got to do this. Painful, but we kept doing it. Well, we kept doing it because the value was there, and the process was beneficial, and it was powerful, and I think it made us better leaders, and it made the company stronger, and it gave. I could tell you, for me, I may have shared this with you. Prior to having a clear strategic direction. There were times when I was frustrated where, I might want to try to do something and then we had to analyze it 6 ways from Sunday. And it was like, oh, I think this would be we should be a little bit more nimble. So that would frustrate me a little bit. But we wanted to make sure we're doing the right thing. And
process at the time.
So once we had a strategic plan, I'll give you an example of how quick it was to make a decision. I get a call, maybe the salesman has approached me and said, hey, we've got a call from a retail gas station in Farkway, Verina, North Carolina, who wants to get a quote. And we're like, well, we're not in North Carolina, but our long-term strategic plan says we're going to walk our way down to the Mid-Atlantic. So I went into it and I said, hey, I got this guy in North Carolina who wants to buy. Well, that's crazy. I go, hey. We have relationships with the suppliers. We can call a common carrier. We can set it up with a contract. I got to get a tax ID number. There's no, and it's in our plan. He goes, it's in our plan. Do it. So we did.
Boom.
So
5-minute conversation.
Because it was predetermined that was part of our target market. It was an easy slam dunk, and that's just sort of a microcosm of the sort of precision it allowed us to have in decision making, and that resulted in a number of good decisions that were done more timely than they otherwise would have been.
Which propelled the business to be in a position to actually increase its value and ultimately exit. Can you walk through the exit and what that process looked like?
Sure. So, like a lot of small businesses, medium businesses, there's an estate planning component that you need to be cognizant of, and so the initial conversations with the investment bank was to do an appraisal, so that the family could make sure that they had an adequate estate plan in place. I think once the appraisal came back, Ed was kind of surprised at the, what
The number.
what it was worth. And so given the fact that I remember saying to him, so I always felt like, again, Ed enjoyed the hunt on the wholesale side. I never felt like Eddie was fully committed to the retail business. And yet we were looking at every city and town in Massachusetts was broke. Fees were going up, taxes were going up. There was a call for a fight for $15 minimum wage, and every dollar that the minimum wage went up when you have 350 hourly people is a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
So it was something that I could just see this constant sort of erosion of our margin, particularly on the retail side, and our competitors were getting larger and larger and larger. So we were sort of stuck in this limbo of our margins are getting eroded and we're fighting against these behemoths in the marketplace. And so in order to compete in that environment, you can have great customer service, you can have the right corner, but still, if your competitor is selling stuff cheaper than you can buy it for, on the shelf, it's a tough market, So I think, and then you find out that somebody's willing to pay you a number that is pretty high for that. You say
Higher than your expectations
higher than
originally.
your expectations. So I remember saying to Ed, my fear is you would sell the stores and not the wholesale business. He said, why do you say the fear? I said, well, the same forces that are eroding our margins on the retail side are also attacking the wholesale side. But they're slower to evolve because there's not really people, but it's fees. And it's like you go to
Regulations.
but also, again, I mentioned that we had 10 million gallons. We had 10 large oil storage tanks. And, we actually had it down to a cycle of one tank out of service every year. And that means a full 653 inspection. That's expensive. Painting tanks is expensive. And as our competitors are getting larger and heating oil as a heating source is declining over the years, it was a longer trajectory, but it was also not a very positive trajectory for heating oil. And so also the natural gas company is really a quasi-public entity that would, they would just, we have marketing dollars. Well, they're doing oil to gas conversions, and, our oil guys are all independent family-owned businesses, and we're fighting against a quasi-public organization. It's really not a level playing field. That's why NORA comes in to sort of supplement that. So, but when Ed said, well, why do you say the fear? I said, well, the same thing, the same cost forces and pressures are being applied to the wholesale side of the business. They're just not as readily evident. And I said, and if you're not careful, you could end up being a 75-year-old guy that owns a lot of rusty steel in Springfield. And you don't want to be that guy. So I think once Ed really thought about it, it was a prudent decision. It was, I don't want to say a no-brainer. I mean, there was a huge emotional attachment for him because it had been his father's legacy, the family business forever. He had been there for 30 years, grinding away, building the business. But at the same time, I think he wanted more for his children, and he saw that those pressures were either going to require a tremendous amount of capital infusion to combat it, or
take the wheelbarrow of money.
Exit the business. And so, I don't want to say it's an easy decision because it was his decision, but I will say to his credit, once he made that decision, he was clear-eyed and focused, like
Get it
it's what he
done.
wants to do. And I think we used a good investment banking firm that knew what they were doing. They actually drove a very competitive bid process, and the rest was history. But it was a grind. I mean, it was, I want to say, it's probably an 18-month period, and probably for half of that time, nobody knew what was going on but me. And so it was Ed and I, and trying to get stuff together. And then we had to put in some stay agreements to keep them there. And it was a very difficult process, time consuming, but I mean, they combed through everything and very thorough, very diligent, and very professionally done. So Matrix Capital Markets did a great job, and I would highly recommend them to anybody who's looking to exit their business. But
It was a bifurcated deal, correct? You had one entity that was interested in retail assets, the other one interested in the wholesale terminal assets?
correct, and that's the other thing. Most businesses in the oil business are really multifaceted. Like there's, it seems like there's a lot of similarities, but yeah, somebody might have stores, card locks, bulk plants, terminals, but other people have real estate investments where they have car washes. I mean, there's a sort of a weird, mix of things that you encounter in the business. And so in our world, the supplier that we had used for years was a large regional player who was interested in our terminaling assets. And this was really through the investment bank. They suggested that we would have greater interest if we bifurcated the deal, because there would be way more people interested in the gas stations, convenience stores, and the branded fuel contracts than the terminals. And so that proved to be true. There was a whole lot more companies interested in the retail assets, but the ones that were interested in the terminaling assets were more niche players who that's what they did. I think the company that ended up buying us was, I think we were their 19th or 20th terminal that they owned. So they knew what they were doing.
They're in the terminal business. Somebody's in the C-store business. They're going to be better at running that. It's difficult to find the unicorn that wants both.
Right.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah. So the bifurcated sale was really a two-part deal where, Sprague, who bought the terminals, they wanted to close quickly. We closed that in January, and then we sort of plugged along, and I think we ended up closing on the gas station convenience store piece and the branded fuel in June of that year, I believe. So it was, it was so consuming for me that I wasn't, it sounds silly, but I wasn't really prepared for what would happen with me after. I feel like I remember the day I left there and turning the lights out. Eddie had already left, and I'm thinking, this is just surreal, And I remember my wife, when I told her Eddie's going to sell the business, she was nervous as hell because we had kids in college and tuition and a mortgage. And I said, Beth, it's fine. We'll figure it out, And I was very calm. I did not ever worry about it. And fortunately, it worked out for me. And, going back to work, years later was really because I missed the excitement of it.
Well, what was life like between when you left Ellie Belcher and somehow you ended up out west?
So it was great. I mean, the funniest thing was I did some consulting for a couple of different businesses because a banker friend of mine, a guy who I respect greatly, a dear friend, asked me to do some work for a client of his. So I did that, dabbled with that, sort of stayed a little busy. We sold our house and we bought our condominium down on Cape Cod. And then the pandemic happened. So we find ourselves in this 2-bedroom condo on Cape Cod. And both of our children were living in my daughter was in Boston and my son was in New York, living in apartments with multiple other roommates. And they both came home to live with us and share a bedroom. And because there was only 2 bedrooms. So they were like 24 and 5. And thank God they get along because they were very close proximity. And it was wonderful. I mean, we had our adult children back for a few months that we wouldn't have gotten it otherwise. And I don't think there was a safer place in the world than Cape Cod during the pandemic. And it was great time to spend with them. And it was really awesome because I wasn't working and both of my children were. So my son worked in the guest room and my daughter had a table set up in our bedroom. And I remember my wife waking me up one day saying, "We got to get up. Catherine needs the office." I was like, okay. So I was happy to get up. So that was fine. We met a lot of people on Cape Cod. Now, the previous winter, we met a lot of people, and then it was the pandemic. And then we decided we would go to Florida in the winter. And so we did that. And it was, I think, the second year in Florida when we had been playing golf and pickleball. I was riding my bike. It was like I was on a long vacation, and it was fine. I was trying to find my groove. But I was never a guy who had a bunch of hobbies. I do play golf, but I'm not like Jones into go play golf 3 days a week. I enjoy playing some pickleball, but I don't want to play pickleball every day. It was great to spend some time with my wife. We would go to the beach in Florida. We would do fun things, but really, I felt like I was 57 when Belcher was sold, and I felt like I was really a little young, and I hadn't really ever planned to be retired at that age. I thought I would work forever, and I think what I realized was I need to continue to think about what retirement's going to look like. I can't even flesh it out in my head yet, but it was a great time. But I just felt like I still had a little bit more in the tank, and I enjoy the industry. I had been really blessed to be with a great company for a long time. And this is going to sound like I'm pandering to you, but I'm really not. I mean, you and I submitted a resume because I saw the ad. Wendy called me and said, "Geez, let's have this chat. I think you should meet Jason." So we had a 1-hour Zoom call scheduled. I think we talked over 3 hours
Almost 4 hours.
Almost 4 hours. And I remember the energy, the intelligence, the curiosity, the personality. I really felt like I could work with you. I liked the fact that you were doing innovative stuff. You were all about the sustainable and the renewables, and you had ambition, but you also understood you had a lot of challenges. You had already accomplished a ton of things in your short tenure here, and I felt like I could help. And I felt like I could work with you. So when I came out here to do the second interview, I think you wanted me to do a Zoom interview with Dana to meet her. And I said, I'd rather come out and meet you in person. Then I drove around and I took the time to go to Hesperia and to Kingman and, up into Tonopah and to drive at the terminal. And I remember thinking, these people are running their business correctly. Like you could tell looking at the terminal that it was first-class operation. It's well maintained. The trucks were in good shape. It was clean. Go back to my experience where Charlie Huff would tell a story how he was a meticulous guy. Eddie, same thing, meticulous. A couple stories I'll tell you. Charlie would tell people all the time he was trying to get a permit, and he's in front of the city council to get a permit in Springfield. And the mayor comes out of her office and down into the city council chambers and says, "Charlie Huff keeps his yard cleaner than I keep my kitchen. Give him the permit." So he was proud of that. And to me, that was a sign that you were serious about running your business the right way, particularly in this industry. You can't run a sloppy operation. It's not good. And so
a lot of risk,
but also
and reputational damage.
Which is
so more important.
So I think you can relate to this too. Eddie and I used to talk about how the reputation that Charlie had entrusted us with was stellar. And we looked at part of our responsibility was to shepherd and protect that reputation and not tarnish it. And I know that you and Christy feel the same way about.
Oh yeah. And I feel like any jobber really, especially a multi-generation jobber,
you're standing on the shoulder of giants.
Exactly right.
You're a chapter in a really long book, and you're just trying to hold that legacy and like make it proud.
Yeah.
Ultimately,
And I can see that, when Dana and Pat come in here and they see what you've accomplished in really relatively short amount of time, they're really happy about it. Like they seem very genuinely excited for you and the future of Rebel, because there's tangible signs that you, the company, are doing really positive things. So,
and it's a collective effort. I mean, none of us are able to do it without their support.
Right.
And then it's the team that really makes any achievement. I'd love to, throw out a pearl of wisdom here and there, but I feel particularly excited like when the team figures it out on their own and you just kind of sit back and you go, approved, execute. And it gets done flawlessly. And then you just get to see another win racked up. But that doesn't mean that it comes without its challenges. Going back to the interview, behind the scenes on my end, I remember going through a stack of resumes because really why we were looking for a CFO is I felt like I was wearing multiple hats. And I told Dana, I've always been honest with her when I felt I was doing good, when I felt I was doing bad, when we were kind of going through the challenges after selling our retail assets and kind of re-energizing the wholesale side of the business. I said, I feel like I'm doing a B- effort in both of these roles.
Yeah.
And for the company to get to where I know it's capable of going, I really need to focus in this area, but that means we need somebody and somebody with experience, particularly for what we do to get us where we need to go. So I got these resumes and I have a guy that I think would be perfect. And I'm like, look at his resume. And she's like, yeah, he understands our position in the oil supply chain extremely well. So there's only one problem though. He lives on the other side of the United States. And she hands the resume back to me and goes, good luck, right? And I'm like, okay, I'm going to take it from here. So we have our 4-hour call. And I was super impressed when you actually came out, that you wanted to come out in person and that you came out a few days early and drove the facilities. I felt like as long as we don't screw it up, we got him. Well, because he's the right type of person. It takes the right type of person to care enough to go out and look at the facilities before you even sit down with people.
But I told you at the time, it's a big decision for me to move across the country. I really want to know what I'm getting involved in.
Yeah.
Right. And I can tell you, you can, anybody who's been in this industry for a while can drive by a facility and whether it's run properly or if it's a shit show. And, and nobody needs that. I don't need that. I mean, some people might need that. I don't need that. So, I've told you 1,000 times that, Tim's doing a great job at the terminal.
Tim Clark. Shout out to Tim Clark. We're good out on here.
Shout out to Tim Clark. I mean, that place is buttoned up like nothing I've ever seen. And it's awesome. But also, he's a very experienced guy. That's what he's doing. He's got a great background. But all of the other operations people and that I've encountered here are similarly committed to excellence. I don't want to say almost to a fault because Charlie will kill me, but at some point, taking care of the customer is a very noble endeavor. But we need to do it prudently. We need to do it cost effectively. We need to make sure that we're getting paid. I mean, those fundamental things just need to happen. And I can tell you that at Belcher's, when I got there, we were billing once a week, right? We continued to work to skinny it down. And I remember one of my toughest customers said to me, you're not going to be happy till you can figure out how to tape the invoice to the bumper of my truck when it's leaving the yard. And I said, Dave, if I could figure it out, I'd do it tomorrow, But again, it's that important, the cash flow, And so,
especially in this business.
Yeah, especially in this business. So those are the types of things that are just, you constantly need to be improving your business, or I firmly believe you're falling behind because your competitors are improving their business. And so it's a constant struggle to do things better. That culture of continuous improvement is critical to any company's success.
Well, to quote our amazing friend from Northern Ireland, Barry Funston, he said, we always paid our bills on time and we always paid our taxes on time. It's not out of this world to expect our customers to do the same. Right. So that's firm, but you're fair, but you're firm. And you're a human being about it.
Yep.
If you run into some unique situations, you try to get creative and work through those situations, but that's a one-off.
Right.
If every customer is a one-off, then the rule is no longer a rule. It's no longer an exception to a rule either. It's just basic chaos.
So there's times when you can work with a customer if they're candid with you and honest with you about the challenges that they're facing and they're being honest. But if they're not being honest with you, then you really need to step back because there's a trust factor. And, if a customer genuinely has a problem, they have they lose a key person through death or illness.
Their mind floods with water.
They get hacked and their systems are locked up. And if there's a real problem that's preventing them from fulfilling their obligation and you work with them, that's building goodwill with them that they will remember forever. But if they're just yanking your chain, then you need to sever it because there's good business out there. And I know that some people feel like that sounds like me just trying to jettison customers, but there are some customers that you're better off without. I mean, it's just the reality of life. And I think any business knows that in their heart of hearts.
And some customers will play the game as long as you'll allow them to play the game. Is then you kind of get honest and you start off on a new. So without getting into the customer specifically, but we have a friendly customer in Arizona that played the game.
Yep.
And you were talking to the manager, trying to explain what is going on. Why are these guys driving out their payments so far? Our AR continues to shoot through the roof until we get paid up. Can you give us that?
So when I got here, I didn't even realize it, but we were not charging finance charges on past due balances. So I called down to one of our facilities and I said, help me understand this. I see a customer that has invoices 70, 80, 90 days past due, and you delivered to them last week. Like, how does that even happen? Like, I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around it. And they just matter-of-factly said, oh, yeah, he said that he only pays us when we threaten to shut him off because there's no cost to carry it out. And I was flabbergasted. And I said, well, tell him two things. One, thanks for his candor. And tell him two, he shut off. Like that's, and then we implemented finance charges. And it is really, we're not in the business of charging finance charges to make money. It's designed as an incentive for people to pay us on time. That's all it is. And so whether it's worked or not, I think to some degree it has. But what it definitely does is it throws a red flag up when people are not paying you on time because it's created automatically. And the next iteration, and we've talked about this, is we need to get to the point where we're offering a prompt payment discount routinely on all products because
carrot and the stick.
Yeah. So that we get paid even quicker. Because again, what our salespeople, operations people, and customers don't really necessarily want to know about or care about is our suppliers are demanding quicker payments, faster payments. And so we find ourselves financing more and more of our customers' businesses. And as we do business with larger customers, that's larger exposure. And it's not really a sustainable model.
Yep. So back to those business fundamentals.
Yep. Exactly right. But again, I know that it's difficult for people that have been here for a long time because we're trying to change it. And so, we've allowed, it's almost like we've been too generous and now we're trying to put the toothpaste back in the tube. And it's really tough but it's necessary. And
particularly necessary if you go through a year like 2022 when fuel prices shoot through the roof, because all of a sudden your cash drops considerably and your inventory and your AR balances go through, and that can create a real big cash flow problem. So these things are protectionary. If you're doing them in a time when you have normal stable commodity prices, people might think that you're being a tough guy. But 3 months, one war, some geopolitical event on another part of the world, it can significantly hinder the company. It can wipe out your cash like that.
And I've been through the cycles. I've seen it. It's hard for me to convey that to people in the field because they think I'm just being a jerk from Massachusetts, right? And so
East Coast charm.
Yeah, my East Coast charm, Michelle. But the reality is when prices of diesel fuel shoot up to $5 a gallon or more, it's also human nature to expect when the customer gets a bill that's 50% larger than normal, it's going to be harder for him or her to pay that on the same time frame. So just at a time when you need them to pay you quicker, they're going to be paying you slower. So
And your suppliers are going to be drafting you quicker because your credit limits are now being completely wiped out.
So the other issue that people need to be aware of is credit limits are dollars, not gallons. So if you say, look, you got a $100,000 credit limit, and they say, well, usually that's a 30-day credit for me. Now it's only 15 because the price went up. You go, yeah, it's only 15 because it's dollars. And that's what we haven't really had that much of a fight about it yet, but I know that's coming because it's going to be a problem.
Well, we live and breathe the fuel business, the oil business. We understand the boom and bust cycles, the commodity prices being volatile. Most customers, it's one of your most expensive line items, but it's just an operating expense.
Yes, but it's also a big dollar. You know, if they're getting a full load of fuel, it's a big dollar. It'll go from 20 grand to 30 or 40 grand.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of money.
And it's a huge impact when they go through those cycles because they're going, hey, I know that I need 10,000 gallons a month and normally my bill is X. And all of a sudden now it's 2X that number. This is a big problem.
So all the more reasons for us to work to be putting tools in place that are going to encourage people to pay us quicker. And the next iteration of that is, we don't do much of it here. We used to do a lot of it at Belcher's, security agreements, mortgages. I've told you a story about holding titles to people's Harley Davidsons, letters of credit. I mean, there's all kinds of ways that you can secure the receivable. People don't want to hear it. And, even just getting people on EFT is a much less painful process, but yet there's a lot of resistance. Yeah. Oh, these are old school customers. They don't want to do it. Well, I heard the exact same thing, 20 years ago in Massachusetts. And yet we got there through a concerted effort and a deliberate attempt to change our payment policy to require it, because for all the same reasons we're dealing with here. We're just getting I feel like we're getting a lot more resistance than I would hope. But yeah, it is what it is. We'll get there.
But there's also creative pricing that you can offer to eliminate that reality from your customer base. If your customer thinks, oh my gosh, I run a farm and I go through 400,000 gallons of diesel during harvest season. And normally the price is $3, but with all these geopolitical events going on, it might rise up to $6. What can I do to protect myself? Fixed forward contracts. But so you still want to get paid timely on the contract, correct? Right? So the timely payment is a universal challenge, right? Particularly with that one. Yeah, because it's a lot of money. Yeah, got to lock it in. A lot of money. So when you moved out here, what were the similarities to the East Coast jobber versus the West Coast jobber? Family business is very similar, or was it wildly different?
The fundamental character of the family unit, incredibly similar. Again, almost eerily similar. The values were the same. If Charlie Huff and Jack Kaysen ran into each other, they might think they're cousins. I mean, it's uncanny the comparative sort of stories that their lives took. The typical, Horatio Alger, author of these books about, the American dream, rich, poor boy does good, makes good. I mean, both those guys lived that, the American dream. And I think that a lot of people have a similar story in this industry. The similarities of, a 70-year-old business. I mean, Ellie Belcher Company was a little bit different in that it started in the 1920s. Leonard was an old farmer, according to Charlie, and the company was essentially a trucking company when Charlie, as a driver, took over the business. And the majority of his business was hauling jet fuel for the Air Force. There's a big Air Force base there, similar to Nellis here in Vegas. And when the Westover Air Reserve Base in the 1960s was the Strategic Air Command base for the Air Force during the Vietnam War, the government built the pipeline. So that pretty much killed 45% of Charlie's business. So rather than throw in the towel, he built the bulk storage tanks and became a wholesaler. He did a lot of different things. He was in the retail heating oil business. He had a gas station or two over the years, but really primarily he was a wholesale distributor. But he had a very efficient business. Like when I got there, Charlie was in Florida during the winter, and he had a key guy running the terminal, and that's where they work 6.5 days in the winter, and then they're taking Fridays off in the summer, and that's what that's why Eddie that's why Eddie diversified the business to balance it out, here the business started as a chain, a gas station, and then it grew
Retail focused.
The terminal was an acquisition more strategic to fund
Support the
retail. And the bulk plants and the lubricant business was
diversify secondary to retail.
And so again, this is what I mean. Every petroleum jobber seems to be made up with a little bit of different clay and mud and rock and glass. So. But
they're all entrepreneurs at the end of the day, if you think about it. And they're in different markets that have different needs. So they're typically multifaceted. And depending on where they're located within the United States, they have ancillary components to their business that are unique to them.
So here, the thing that I find really interesting is, we're doing way more lubricants than we did at Belcher. But the client base is completely different. Like we've talked about this. Like we would not touch a municipal bid if it bid us. We just weren't comfortable with it. Again, very conservative business. We did some things with like the power company, that sort of thing, but we weren't really chasing
risky customer segments.
The city bid, because they were again broke. Most of them were broke, in my estimation. And also they always had provisions. So payments contingent on appropriations by the taxpayers. Like, okay. Well,
we've lived that.
Yeah, so that's a problem. So anyways, but, in the West Coast, what I find incredible here in Vegas is, it's sexy to say you're supplying some of these big casinos on the Strip or some of the big events that come to town. We have some really interesting customers. But, the mining industry is an animal unto itself. And it's an amazing industry to be involved in. And I think it's exciting. I mean, for me, it's all new and I'm learning a lot about it. And
well, the barrier to entry is really steep with mining. The safety regulations, for those people that aren't familiar with it, I mean, you crack out your MSHA regs, particularly if you're talking underground coal. I mean, it's that thick.
Yep.
You sit on the tailbed of a truck on a mine site, good luck, your contractor license is revoked. I mean, you really have to be dead nuts on. And even if you do everything right, mistakes still happen. It's still one of the most dangerous work environments in the United States, even though mining in the United States is probably one of the safest environments to mine in the world. So if you can actually do that and do it well, a lot of opportunity. And I think particularly with this administration and what they're trying to do.
And we're doing it well. And we're seeing the fruits of that labor. And, so it's exciting. And again, that the entire segment is booming right now, which is very positive for us. And also our guys are out beating the bushes on, construction companies and various other entities, and so there's I actually had a conversation today with somebody on Cape Cod who was doom and gloom about the economy, and they're worried about the tariffs and people losing their jobs. I go, that's so funny. Here there is a palpable sense of optimism, but yet they're not feeling the love back east.
I mean, construction, power generation, manufacturing, mining. There's a lot of infrastructure that our country's lacking.
Yeah.
I think there's been a lot of bad behavior, policy, whatever you want to call it, for many years, if not decades. So to see that there's an attempt to right size that, and you can kind of see it with the markets, I think people are palpably excited to hopefully get the government boot off the back of everybody's neck and let American enterprise kind of run free and do things properly, though.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's just a lot of distrust and a lot of ill will that's embedded in our system. And, all I can say is when you've got an administration that's pro-business and pro-energy, I'm optimistic. I mean, I think it's long overdue. So.
Before we finish out, I do want to say this because it's something that you said to me, and I've said it on several occasions. You talked to me about working with Ellie Belcher, and you talked about how important our job is. You're providing fuel, you're providing an energy source like to your community.
Yeah.
And you think about those customers, the construction customer, the hospital, the home heating oil, which is your residents.
Mm-hmm.
We're supplying that to those people. So like it's a big responsibility, but I think it's no disrespect to any other business out there, but it's not selling bubble gum.
Right.
It matters, right? It matters for our modern way of life.
It's important work. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's also, we've talked about this before too. Not only is it critically important, I mean, if trucks stop running or, even windmills, they don't turn without our product.
It takes a lot of diesel fuel and lubricants to keep those things going.
So if the mines shut down, that's a huge problem. There's no more electric cars, no more batteries, no more a lot of things, right? If it's not grown, it's mined, right? That's what they say. So, the work that we do is critically important. And also the work that we do has such a ripple effect to not only the families of the people that work here, but to our customers, our suppliers, the vendors who we buy tires from, the computer software suppliers. I mean, we impact a lot of different people.
Yeah.
The bank that we deal with, I mean, we're turning a lot of bucks through their bank. The lawyers we deal with, everybody,
safety consultants, environmental consultants,
those on it don't have
community at large. Yeah.
And so it's meaningful and it's not just important. It's like I said, it's critically important. And I think that I can tell you when, selling heating oil in New England, my wife could attest to this. I mean, plenty of days we got 2-3 feet of snow and I was off to work, and we had to get the terminal open because we were supplying, people that had the plows and the plows needed to run and the power plants needed the backup diesel. And, we felt that it was we were a critical piece of the safety infrastructure and the infrastructure. And also it's, part of what we felt was a responsibility. We had great relationships with the emergency response people at the city, the firemen, the policemen, the DPW. We felt like we were good community citizens, and I know that Rebel feels the same way. And we're good partners in a community.
And I think we continue to look for ways to support our community. Obviously, like money's one way, but there's other ways that you can bring a spotlight to a community and support it, particularly if you're doing business in that community. I think that you should be a stakeholder. You should want the best for that community, should get involved in your state associations and really give back. And not just in a monetary way. Yeah. We were out picking up trash for the Mint 400. We sell a lot of race fuel, off-road community. And, those races can get dirty. So our sales guys want to go out there. They don't want to leave a black eye on these events. They go out there and they pick up a bunch of trash in the desert.
It's great.
Does it take any money? It takes a little bit of time and effort.
Well, it's also, I think it shows a commitment to our customer that, we're selling some product out there, but also our people care about the city, and the community that they're in. So.
Well, Dave, I know you got to take a flight tomorrow to go see, you're going to visit your mother back in Massachusetts.
95th birthday.
There you go. Good son to show up for that. Yeah. I appreciate you coming on and doing this. Hopefully you'll be back on. We can discuss some more.
Hopefully I didn't make too big an ass of myself. So
never. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.